Today is May 27th, 2014, and this is episode 113. This program is intended for informational and educational purposes only. Cryptocurrency is a new field of study. Consult your local futurist, lawyer, and investment advisor before making any decisions whatsoever for yourself. Welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. My name is Adam B. Levine, and today we're all over the place. We join Stephanie as she speaks with Timo Hanke, the lead cryptographer at Bitcoin mining firm Cointerra. Then, we talk music, patents, Bitcoin, and band blogs with Parker Emerson. And finally, Stephanie talks lending in Bitcoin with Jack Kernan. But first, Jeremy Lamb has been thinking about automating cryptocurrency storefronts. He tells me about his new open-source distributed virtual vending machine project, Vend. Enjoy the show. Today on Let's Talk Bitcoin, we're joined by Jeremy Lamb. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Adam. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So, Jeremy, you're working on an open-source project called Vend. Can you tell me what that's about?
For lack of a better way of saying it, is a really simple digital vending machine based upon Counterparty. In essence, what it allows you to do is set up a little blockchain application, a little digital vending machine that accepts payments, and that payment, you'd say, would be usually in Bitcoins, and it will automatically send back the Counterparty asset in question.
In practice, what type of applications would this be useful for?
For something that's that simple, there's actually quite a lot of applications when you actually uncover it from the surface. In the most simplest form, you can actually create, as I mentioned before, a vending machine, and that vending machine can be used as a means of making your IPO. So, for example, you can load up a vending machine with the shares for your IPO, and you can get people to send Bitcoins to that vending machine, and they'll automatically receive their shares without any fuss whatsoever.
And so the advantage of using something like this then is that it doesn't require you to go through a market. It's more just like someone set this up as like a web page, and then they can, there's an address there. They send Bitcoins to that address. Now it sends it back to the address that sent it, right?
That's right. So for the user or for the investor, it's a really, really simple process. There's a single address that you can advertise on your web page, and everyone can just go ahead and send their funds to that web page and get back their asset.
What's a more complicated use or a more interesting use of this besides the kind of basic crowdfunding vending machine approach? Because that's what it is, right? It's like a crowdfunding vending machine.
Yes, that's right. So when you have a look at some more complicated cases, you can actually think about this vending machine working in a two-way direction. So what we're talking about with a vending machine is you send, say, Bitcoins in, and then you get the counterparty asset out. If you were then to allow a reverse direction to send the counterparty asset into it and then go back to Bitcoin, then you've got something a little bit more interesting. So the other thing that's also worth mentioning is that Vend is compatible with any Bitcoin API altcoin. So, for example, the API between Litecoin, Dogecoin, and quite a lot of the other altcoins is essentially the same as Bitcoin, which means that Vend is also compatible with altcoins as well. So taking that to what I mentioned about a two-way vending machine, you can actually set up Vend as a exchange or gateway to bridge between Counterparty and a altcoin of your choice.
So one of the things that I'm trying to figure out here is how does each vending machine get its price? I mean, is this just like a hard number that's set at the beginning? Are these trading automatically on a decentralized exchange? Is like the person running each installation just like taking on that risk and reward themselves?
That is up to the owner of the machine itself. So yes, it depends on how you want to use the vending machine. So if it's in a crowdfunding or an IPO style, if it's in that kind of mode, then yes, they could set up a fixed price for the asset, or they can actually use a formula of some kind that could be time-based. It could be based upon other factors as well. So it's possible for the person, of course, this requires customization to actually bring down live quotes from other exchanges and actually base their price on that. You could create a vending machine with a floating price as well. In fact, it's also possible if someone would like to take a vending machine and then back that out onto a centralized exchange as well to actually create an automatic Forex machine that pulls, lack of a better word, asset in question from the centralized exchange and on-sells it into the vending machine.
Can you explain that for me again?
Yeah, so what a operator could do is create a vending machine on counterparty with Vend such that it backs onto a centralized exchange. So the vending machine could advertise a fixed price of some kind or a moving price that could be broadcast on the counterparty platform. And off the back of that, it could actually tap into a centralized exchange and automatically buy and sell the equivalent real life, for lack of a better word, asset, and then sell that into the counterparty equivalent.
So essentially what you've created here then is an automatic interface that allows you to have on one side of it Bitcoin or counterparty transaction and on the other side of it something. And right now that's some kind of cryptocurrency, generally speaking, but in the future it's going to be kind of all kinds of weird things.
That's right. It's completely open to your imagination there. So it could actually back out onto any kind of real life asset, as long as you have the means of being able to digitally represent it in some way, and of course be able to represent it in some way that a buyer of that asset would be interested in picking up. It would be possible, of course, to say put a car on there or something, but you'd have to have some kind of means of actually representing that car digitally and also proving that you have that car digitally to trade.
I've been looking at a lot of projects that kind of revolve around using auctions as pricing mechanisms, because sometimes you don't know what you should be charging for something, and the market is interesting in that it can tell you what a good price is. Could this type of interface be modified to provide that sort of thing? I mean, would that be a complete reinvention of it, or would that be a relatively small change?
It would be quite a large change, but the basic operation of Vend would allow you to do such a thing. So at its core in the technology, it's very simple. It just looks at the blockchains in question one by one as each block comes across. As it comes across, it parses it, it understands what's been sent or received or the action that's occurred on the blockchain, and then it persists that state into a database. Then it uses some logic, the vending machine operator, to decide what it does. So it would be possible to take inputs into the vending machine from various sources and actually, for lack of a better word, collate it together to create an auction-style contract or auction-style functionality that the vending machine can actually provide in the end.
Sounds like I'll have to look into that. So now, where do these actually live? If I wanted to run a vending machine, would I be running this on a server? I mean, is this a decentralized service or is it not?
It's a centralized service. So it's quite important to point that out. You would either have to run it on your own servers or have someone host it for you if it was simpler that way. It is centralized, but at the same time, I've designed Vend to be a example of how a centralized exchange or centralized application should be run. So it's completely transparent, it's open source, and what's really excellent about it in this respect is if someone would like to go and audit your vending machine, they could download Vend from the website. If you were to provide people with the parameters of your vending machine, they can run the vending machine and actually check to see that the outputs of your machine matches what they can receive when they run the vending machine in a read-only fashion, for example. So it's really created as an example of how we can create a centralized application, but in the most transparent way possible.
This is a centralized application in that there's a server that it runs on or several servers that it runs on. You're creating this technology, but it's not centralized on you. This is something, I mean, like, can you talk to me a little bit about the business that you're creating? Is there a business here? Are you just creating this and donating it to the environment, or is there a plan here? What are you doing?
Of course, yes. So it is decentralized in the point that if you create a vending machine, it's got nothing to do with myself if you don't want it to. There is services I can obviously lend if people were interested in creating a vending machine. That is, if you wish to create a vending machine which is customized, has some very interesting interfaces. So I've got quite a lot of experience, of course, in interfacing in various systems, back-end systems. That's one of the things that I've worked on in the past. What I see is that there's going to be a multitude of uses for a vending machine, and some people would like that to be turnkey, and that can be provided as a service and highly customized. Fundraising, for example, there's a lot of ideas that you can implement in a vending machine for fundraising, and that requires quite a lot of customization. The source code is completely available. It will be completely free for everyone, the basic vending machine. And of course, if companies or people have the resources to customize it themselves, they definitely can. Otherwise, they could always reach out to ourselves and we'd be happy to help out in that respect.
I like your style.
It's a really simple application. It's rather obvious, and maybe that's what makes it so delightful, that something so simple can actually give rise to quite complex behavior or quite desirable behavior at the same time.
Well, so before we let you go, we have a lot of entrepreneurs and, kind of opportunistic people in our audience. So I think that, what you're talking about here, this seems to me like it's an opportunity for people who are looking for a way to get involved. Like if you want to run, talk to me about that. Do you think that we'll have people who make businesses based around running these vending machines? And what's the burden here?
I would hope that there's a market there for these vending machines, because what we need is services, and services is what's most important to the customer in the end. So we've got all these really awesome tools that are coming up, but these require either end user knowledge or it requires knowledge of the actual platform itself. And what I think is the next step is to actually have these tools which make it as simple as possible for the user to get into. And by that, it just means that they should only need to know how to operate a wallet, and they can actually get involved in these 2.0 services and these platforms. And so I hope that there will be a market for these vending machines. The cost or the operational cost of these vending machines is actually quite low. There is a requirement, of course, to have the blockchains in sync. So for that, I would recommend that the operators of vending machines run a full node, and that would be actually good for the Bitcoin network as well. Apart from that, it's just the actual operational cost of the vending machine itself, which is actually really low. It's a very small application. The amount of knowledge required to maintain it, if you had created these things before, is not that much.
So if people would like to get involved or learn more, how should they do that? And how do you spell vend? I thought that it was V-E-N-D, but I think there are two Ds maybe?
There's two N's, so that's a little yes. It's a little bit tricky. So V-E-N-N-D. We will be launching the public GitHub repository in the next coming weeks. You can find more information at vend.io, and as things progress, we'll be releasing information to that page.
Jeremy Lamb, thank you very much for your time. This is a very exciting project. We look forward to your progress.
Thanks, Adam.
CryptoKit is the world's first Chrome browser Bitcoin wallet. It's the easiest, fastest Bitcoin wallet payment system. With a simple one-click install, it takes just seconds to get your wallet set up. And because CryptoKit finds the address and payment for you, there's no more fussing around or tab switching. CryptoKit is more than just a wallet. It comes with a preloaded PGP encrypted social network, news feeds from Reddit and Google, and up-to-date charts from exchanges. Finally, CryptoKit Directory allows you to make two-click payments with any of the BitPay merchants. Once you install CryptoKit, you won't need anything else. For more information or to download CryptoKit, visit CryptoKit.com.
Hi, listener. Here at Let's Talk Bitcoin, we're building a global network of correspondents able to contribute on-the-ground perspective when cryptocurrency-related information comes across their filters. If you'd like to join our global conversation, send an email with your name and geographic or cultural niche to apply@letstalkbitcoin.com. Just like Bitcoin, the only barrier to entry is your time and good work. Thanks for listening.
Speaking with Timo Hanke. You are the lead developer for Cointera, is that right?
I'm the lead cryptographer for Cointera, right.
Welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin. First, tell me about Cointera.
Well, Cointera is an ASIC mining manufacturer. It was founded in May of 2013. And we're shipping products since January and have by now shipped about 4,000 of our Terra miners.
Okay, and so as a developer, you write the software that runs the ASIC hardware that does Bitcoin mining?
Well, first of all, we developed the actual code for the ASIC that does the SHA-256 hashing and optimize it as far as possible. ASICs are actually built on a 28 nanometer process with Global Foundries. And of course, we developed also the whole system around it, including the boards, system, cooling, and software on the controller.
So you had a part in developing the entire machine from the hardware down to the code that runs it?
I myself had a little bit of contribution in almost any part, that's right. But I do not have a hardware background. I'm a mathematician. And so my main contribution was in the software, yes.
Okay, and so how do you prepare for a job like this? Have you ever done anything like this before Bitcoin or before you got interested in mining?
No, there's certainly not ever been any job like this before. Everybody involved in Bitcoin certainly knows how crazy the space is. And the mining business in particular is extremely fast-moving, and there's nothing like that.
Yeah, I imagine it must be kind of stressful when you're working for a company that manufactures ASICs because the difficulty of the Bitcoin network is constantly going up. People want to make a profit on their mining equipment that they buy, and so you have tremendous pressure to ship the product very fast. Is that right? But it still has to work, and it has to be good.
Yes, that's correct. The pressure is certainly there, and it's an incredible amount of pressure to deliver hardware, and we cannot afford to have any error in the process and come out with a product that doesn't work properly. And yeah, it's been a very crazy experience.
So what are some of the things that have gone wrong? Like what kind of problems does an ASIC manufacturer encounter?
I think we have, for the most part, avoided the very severe problems. In the space of silicon development, it's unheard of that a chip is basically developed and brought to a system within 6 months from conception to actually working silicon. And we could not do any amount of testing that silicon usually goes through. And so with that, we're extremely satisfied that our first silicon worked right away. So that's the huge potential problem that we avoided.
What can go wrong with silicon chips? Like, why wouldn't they work?
Well, if it was a more complicated chip, like a regular CPU, it's quite common that they don't work at first. They go through several rounds of production, actually. Silicon comes back, is tested, and then goes through fixes, bug fixes, and a second round of production. But actually, Bitcoin ASIC is not that complicated, so it is possible to, in simulation, test it enough so that your first existing silicon actually works.
Do you know of other ASIC manufacturers where they've had that problem, where they ordered chips and the chips were defective from the first round of production and they had to go through another round?
Maybe, potentially, yes. I don't know about any of these incidents, but there have been a lot of delays in the industry. I don't know what those delays exactly are contributed to, but it's possible.
Well, so what else could go wrong when you're trying to make the end goal of making a machine that mines Bitcoins? Like, what are the other points of failure?
The other points of failure besides ASIC, well, a huge challenge has been to deliver the amount of power to the ASIC, because we're talking here about a single chip, in our case, which consumes about 400 watts. That's substantially more than any big CPU or even powerful GPUs. So designing a board that can deliver that amount of power, reliable to the chip, and also cooling the chip is a challenge.
Okay, and so how are the chips cooled in the machines that you're working on?
We have a liquid cooling system In our TerraMiner, which now hashes at 2 terahash per second, we have 4 chips doing 500 gigahash each, and chips dissipate about 400 watts of power, and each chip has a liquid cooling head, and then the heat is exchanged through a radiator, and fans blow air through the radiator.
Okay, and so personally, I don't have a background in cryptography or math or computer science, but can you just explain for somebody who's non-technical, how do you optimize the actual code that the machine uses to mine?
That's a difficult problem. You have to, you can of course look at the algorithm, the SHA-256 as it's defined, but you will not find, if you just look at the algorithm, you will not find so many things that you can actually optimize. Of course, if you're trying to implement this algorithm in hardware, then a lot of new factors arise. You can think about how you actually lay out the cells, the transistors on the chip, and there's a lot of improvement that can be done there. You want to arrange them as compact as possible and as power efficient as possible. So that's a job for the hardware designers, for the people who do the physical layout actually.
Okay, and so before you started working with Cointerra, had you been interested in Bitcoin? Had you been a Bitcoin miner yourself?
Personally, surprisingly, I've never mined a single Satoshi myself. Not before and not after I got involved with Cointerra, but yes, I've been interested in Bitcoin for almost 2 years, or about 2 years before I even heard of Cointerra.
Why not mine? Is there a reason for that?
I was more interested in the protocol itself and application side, the scripting system of Bitcoin transactions and what you could do with them and what kind of new applications you can come up with. I was not so much interested in the mining itself.
And one last question, where do you see Bitcoin mining going in the future? We've got a long way to go before the last Bitcoin is mined, and it just seems like the hashing power is going up exponentially all the time. The difficulty of the network is increasing. More people are trying to get into mining and maybe trying unsuccessfully to make a profit. What do you see in the next 5 years Bitcoin mining as a field looking like?
In the next 5 years, that's a crazy question to ask anybody in the Bitcoin space.
Okay, maybe in the next 1 year.
Could ask in the next 5 months, maybe. But anyway, it's extremely hard to predict, and I think nobody really knows where it's going. It's true, Bitcoin network difficulty is going through the roof. I think it depends on so many external factors, on Bitcoin price, adoption, maybe transaction volume, depends on what kind of role transaction fees will play for the miners. It will depend a little bit on the development of the hardware, how much it can be improved, but of course that is kind of predictable. So much can happen. It can. I think we're going to see huge data centers being developed, but I think we'll also continue to see individual miners mining in their house, because even though everybody has to pay its power, of course, but individual miners can still save a lot of money on hosting costs. So I don't think that decentralized mining will disappear anytime soon.
What about the way that mining is powered? Do you see solar power or geothermal or other alternative sources of energy powering Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, of course, any large-scale miner will be hugely incentivized to find the cheapest source of power. I don't think it will be solar, but people are using hydroelectric power because that's a cheap source and often available in cooler countries, I think.
I know you're not interested in mining, but if you were to develop a Bitcoin mining operation right now, if you were going to try to beat all the competition and do something better, faster, that would mine more Bitcoins, how would you go about doing that now?
Well, we are trying to do that now. We're constantly developing new generations of chips, and that's the way where you can really improve things. And
so you think it's in the chips, and the size of the chips is going to get smaller and smaller?
Yes, it's in improving the physical implementation, improving it towards becoming less and less power hungry. And of course, it's about being always on the latest technology available. It means the smallest process node available. And besides that, a large miner, of course, has other ways too to improve his efficiency and reduce cost, and depending on how he arranges his cooling, and if he maybe would be able to use the heat that is produced for some other purpose. Of course, you can think of if your miners already produce megawatts of heat, to use that to heat up water and use that for other purposes.
You're going to make a perpetual motion machine. No, just kidding.
If that was possible.
If that was possible, right. All right, well, Timo, thank you so much. Your company, Cointerra, where can people find them online?
At www.cointerra.com.
Okay, thank you so much.
Interview number 5. This is Parker Emerson, Day 2 Coin Summit. Parker, thanks for being with us today on Let's Talk Bitcoin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So you are with My Blog Band LLC.
We actually are now Blog Band LLC. We've rebranded since we obtained the patent. The patent is in my name. So basically what we are is a patented social network for musicians to collaborate online in a band that they start or they join. They can audition for bands. They can create like a user profile page, like a MySpace profile or a Facebook profile. And then they can create a band page, and they can invite people to join the band like a group. They can create a song in that band, and then they can upload tracks into that song file, download them, rework them, and repost them, and select which version is displayed or published.
So you said that it's a patented process, and this sounds like it's a very collaborative thing. So patents in the in this space are sort of interesting. What is your strategy with the patent? Why was that a decision you made, and what does it enable you to do here?
Well, I went to the iPhone Dev Camp not long after I initially started the website, and I was hoping to find developers there, but I don't have a particular amount of expertise. I'm familiar with like HTML and posting code and all the internet and content management systems, but developing a JavaScript app like we needed was just a little bit over my head. So I went the route of intellectual property protection because I felt like it was an invention, and it was the best way to establish what we were doing in that space at the time.
So what is the particular thing that you've patented here? What is the innovation? Because it sounds to me like it's a social network, and so can you just describe exactly what's going on?
Right. So the claims basically are this creating of a group and the creating of a song, and then the post, and then the display and publishing of a specific version of that song, and the remote reworking of musical collaborations.
So is there something underlying this that uses the Bitcoin infrastructure, or are you using Bitcoin to enable this, or what kind of payment technologies are kind of built into it?
We also have future patents pending that will include and incorporate Bitcoin payments and payments in a host of different currencies, such that the payments, when either an album or a song is sold, they get split between the members of that band.
So are you familiar with user-created assets built on top of Bitcoin?
No, I'm not. You were talking about that. I was hoping to learn more about it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second, because one of the interesting things is that essentially creating a new user-created asset for every single piece of content that's going to be.
That's great.
So what that means is that then through these assets, so if you create a new asset and let's apply this to songs, for example. You have a song, and you create it. You create this asset. It then has 10,000 shares that trade just the same as Bitcoin does, except they also can utilize a decentralized person-to-person exchange that is kind of built into this platform. It's very, very inexpensive to do this. And then you can essentially have one Bitcoin address that controls the issuance of this token and controls this token. So any revenue that comes into that address can then be sent out to all of the constituent shares as a dividend.
That's fantastic.
So it seems like that really enables what you're talking about, right?
Yes, and also that also helps make sure that musicians get paid for what they do, and
right.
And it also helps licensing and all of this.
Right. Again, it seems like these blockchain technologies really can enable. I think that, again, this idea of creating a group and then creating songs that are essentially monetized based off of that, I think that all of the tools are out there. So instead of having to build, roll your own sort of solution and deal with all the security stuff, you can essentially leverage Bitcoin to do kind of the same thing, or create your own chain, and again, that's the thing, is that you start talking about something like music, and maybe it's too big to fit on Bitcoin. Maybe it should be its own thing, or maybe, again, these are markets that should create
Why don't you just send somebody the song itself?
Right, exactly. Well, that's the point, is that with a model like this, you don't even have to really charge for the song, because the monetization comes from the group being the initial controllers of that revenue, and then they can choose to either, have revenue come in when they license it for, some sort of advertising deal or whatever. There are a variety of ways that you can get paid. Then you do the distribution through these systems.
Well, this is all really exciting stuff, because I've gotten at this convention to link up with a lot of people, and I've kind of stitched together some people's projects who might actually make this manifest into a functioning platform. All sorts of formats in which music can be downloaded, purchased, and distributed outside of the mainstream, like iTunes and
Well, I think that's really
Amazon.
what we're seeing here, is that, there's this sudden flowering of all of these different ideas, all of these different projects that all try to address these problems. And again, I don't know necessarily which ones are going to be successful. I hope you're successful, but there have been such problems for so long. I mean, why is this a problem that you wanted to attack? Why is this something that matters to you?
Because I just feel like there are a lot of musicians who go unheard. They're really good musicians who just aren't recognized, and then they get lost in the sea of the internet. But to bring them to the forefront, to give them, there's no point in signing up for an iTunes if you're a small musician just trying to get noticed. They don't do anything to help you promote yourself. They don't do anything to help you out.
But there's cost.
And there's cost for you if you ever wanted to do that.
So this lowers the barrier to entry, really, is what we're saying.
And
here.
we're going to promote people. We're going to help distribute music and really get.
But if you're successful, don't you have the same problem as iTunes?
Like, what is that?
Well, no. You said that iTunes doesn't do anything to promote people. They do something to promote people, but they tend to be people who pay them money. Yeah, it tends to be like big brands and things like that.
No, this is the great part is it's a social network,
right.
and we give people tools to promote themselves,
I see.
Really useful tools,
right.
like
so as opposed
SEO and all of this built into the framework.
So as opposed to iTunes, where they list you, and then if you're popular or you pay them, then you get promotion,
Exactly.
but there's no ability to promote yourself.
Not really, no.
Okay, so you're really talking about more of a toolkit.
It is going to be, yeah.
Cool. Great.
For sure.
Well, Parker, thank you very much for your time. Is there anything else, are you looking for any development?
We're poised. We're open to development. I'm thinking about creating some equity using colored coins to see if I can encourage people who want to develop based on taking equity. And then also, we're poised to really be a major player here because we have the IP asset and we also have the plan and the vision for it.
Well, that's great. So if somebody'd like to get in touch with you or is interested in your project, is there a website or an email address?
Yes, it's a little bit technical, but I'm parkeremerson.com, and that's EMMERSON. I have 2 M's in my last name, parkeremerson.com, and then I'm powerinthelines@gmail.com, and you can contact me using any of those methods.
Parker, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
This is Stephanie Murphy for Let's Talk Bitcoin. I'm at the Inside Bitcoin's New York City conference, and I just finished a panel titled Bitcoin, Remittances, and the Developing World. Now, on that panel, we talked about a number of Bitcoin issues related to the so-called other 6 billion, including micro-lending. And there was a gentleman that introduced himself to me at the end of the conference saying that he was working on Bitcoin lending. Not necessarily micro-lending, but we'll find out a little bit more about that in a moment. I want to welcome Jack Kiernan to the podcast. Hi, Jack.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So you're interested in Bitcoin lending. You don't really differentiate between micro and, macro lending?
Make no distinction. And I think the beauty of the Bitcoin protocol will allow, many borrowers to borrow from a single lender or many lenders to borrow from a single entity. So the idea of sizing those transactions within a a nomenclature, I don't think is fair.
Right, it's kind of arbitrary. What's micro and what's macro, anyway.
Micro on whose level? A government or an individual? So I think the Bitcoin itself, or I hate to keep referring to just Bitcoin, I want to say any cryptocurrency, really allows that close to zero transaction cost. And by virtue of that, you are able to facilitate these transactions from a micro, for lack of a better word, microtransactions to macro transactions.
Yeah, if anything, I would say that the distinction between micro and macro, whether you're talking about micro loans or micro payments, to me, a micro transaction is something where the typical transaction fees could seriously interfere with that amount, or they're a significant percentage of that amount. So like if you're talking about a micro payment, like it's pretty much not feasible to pay for a 25-cent newspaper article on the web on a website with a credit card, because the credit card would want to take 3% plus 25 cents or something like that, and then your whole payment's gone. So I would consider that a micro payment that would be enabled by Bitcoin. And the same thing with loans, right? If you're trying to send $100 by Western Union from the U.S. to India, you might expect to pay a fee of somewhere around $10 to $20, and that's going to really cut into the amount of that payment. So, what do you think about that?
I think the cost prohibitive nature of current state transactions on the internet are the exact problem cryptocurrency seeks to solve. So, I think the idea of a payment network where these zero cost transactions are encouraged, it should be that we're all striving towards. I think the 3% market we spoke of, 3 to 5%, depending on what credit card you're using and then what protocol you're using to send that money. They've been making a lot of money for a very long time, and it's really to the detriment of those who need the money and the undervalued currency.
Now, some people say that those fees, especially when we're talking about microlending or sending money across global borders, political borders, a lot of people say that most of the cost actually comes from complying with regulations, and it's government-imposed costs. It's not the cost of actually moving the money itself. What do you think about that?
I think that is a very political answer given to you from motivated individuals. I think with a banking background, I've seen the infrastructure of banks from both a technology, governance, and compliance standpoint. I think there's a large mechanism in place that is really just not efficient by any means. And what Bitcoin allows is that trust-free transaction, the trustless transaction, whereas if you go to a financial institution, whether it's Chase or Citi or whoever, there's an inherent trust implied in that transaction. You're trusting that the organization is run efficiently, that the architecture is correct and accurate, that your transmission of funds is accurate and done correctly. These are all
just trust us. Yeah.
Yeah. These are all the concerns that come with being a big bank. The idea of Bitcoin averts all of those problems at the architectural level. I think compliance and regulatory issues is and should be a big part of what goes on. I don't think to function in anonymity is the answer, but I don't think overburdensome compliance is the answer either. I think there's a happy mix, and I think some of the ideas that came out today on that panel were spot on, insofar as, let things kind of happen and then move from there.
So what would you say is a happy mix of regulation and compliance versus a burdensome one? Because it seems like that's an arbitrary point depending on who you ask, right?
I do, and I think it's the perspective you take when reviewing these transactions. So if you review them from a front-to-back type way, so, okay, I onboard the customer, I know who you are, and then you're now permitted to do these sort of transactions. I think what the cryptocurrency infrastructure allows you to do is trace that money backwards. So if you see a consistent payment structure where a single account is receiving money time and time again from a variety of networks, okay, maybe we should investigate this. So rather than look from the minutia up, take the big picture down and say, okay, here's the main flows, here's where the majority of money is going, and really look at it piecemeal. Say, okay, here's a big chunk, here's another big chunk. Does this make sense? Does this fall within the confines of the law? And if not, then let's investigate. And that's the point at which I think the intrusion should occur, not preemptively.
Okay, so tell me about your background and tell me about your idea that you're working on related to Bitcoin lending.
My background, out of school, I became a floor trader at the NYMEX. I was trading oil, gas, natural gas. And then Bush in 2006 mandated the renewable fuel standard, which called for ethanol to be blended in gasoline. I then began doing a transportation type arbitrage with the ethanol, because you can't pipeline ethanol. It has to be taken by truck, a barge, a rail, because they lubricate all the petroleum pipes with water. Alcohol and water don't mix, so I learned how to program in order to facilitate this payment.
Alcohol and water don't mix? But isn't that like every mixed drink that there is? I mean...
Well, the alcohol and water combine, whereas petroleum and water don't.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you don't want it to mix.
You do not want it to mix.
Okay.
All right. So the problem with ethanol has always been the logistics. So that said, I learned how to program. And then that curious nature that you just kind of saw, when I learned about Bitcoin, was just excited. I started building mining equipment because it interested me, and it became a trading game for me. Nearer term, in the present, I've kind of been traveling to as many of these conferences as I can, kind of getting an idea of the landscape, and have really not seen an opportunity for those who are long Bitcoin to invest them for interest. So I'm looking to bring a vehicle by which those who are long Bitcoin the opportunity to gain interest, as well as offer needed capital to those throughout the United States.
Okay, and so you were saying off the air that what you want to do is kind of facilitate Bitcoin lending that uses real-world data to determine credit worthiness and stuff like that, such as credit scores, and if it's a company, perhaps their bond rating or something like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think there's other, from an individual perspective, we have 3 credit scores, right? So as part of our AML, anti-money laundering and know your customer rule set, we're asking for credit scores as well. So if you want to borrow money on our network, you're going to make available to us, your credit rating within, the structured society, so we know, how trustworthy are you.
Well, there are some major issues with credit ratings. I actually just watched a video about this a couple days ago, but basically, what these companies want is for you to be in debt, and so if you don't borrow money, then your credit score can get dinged, and it can change in a day based on certain factors. They have information in there that they're not supposed to be tracking, like if you live in a, quote, high minority area, which, they may be able to infer your race or something, and that could affect your credit score and the interest rates that you get offered in certain loans. I guess what I'm asking here is, why use the credit score when it's so flawed? Why not just come up with something totally new to determine someone's creditworthiness? And this also ignores like other parts of the world where people don't have credit. They don't have a credit score because they have never been able to access credit. So this is just, it's certain people in the U.S. How is it different than the current system, and why is that good to use the current system?
I think I made the distinction of being in the United States first and foremost, because that's, where we choose to operate to be in. I think the model is extensible across the globe, but I know that, given legislation and the culture right now, it's needed to be done in a single, domiciled location. Now, you bring up inherent flaws with credit rating systems, of course. And I think the idea of introducing a new credit type rating to an already new system is bringing too much to one point at one time. I think, as with any system, there's inherent flaws. And this just gives us a basis from which to work. Really, the credit score is the basis from which to work, because down the road, through using the platform, there's a score associated with your usage of my platform. So we'll move away from the traditional credit score, but in lieu of that, known quantity of your ability to repay, I'm going to use the credit score as an indication to investors that this person is worthy of my money.
Mm-hmm. And so investors would give money to your firm, and then people would receive loans and then pay them back in Bitcoin, in dollars, and what?
Interesting question. And no, we would never take ownership of the actual coin.
It's just a brokerage thing?
Brokerage, yeah. So we're back to backing the trade. Now, it depends what the final client is looking for, whether that be cryptocurrency or dollar. I think of most benefit to us would be obviously transferring to dollar and giving them the American dollar. But I think allowing for both is kind of the ideal state.
You're familiar with Ripple, is that right?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. So, it sounds like what you're doing is kind of similar to Ripple, but more in the system, more you're going to interface with the credit ratings. And why would someone use a service like yours instead of just going sort of a more decentralized route like Ripple?
I think Ripple is an amazing technology. and really, really well thought out, but it doesn't use the Bitcoin, right? So we're leveraging what exists.
But you can borrow Bitcoins on Ripple.
You can, but I think most people, the Ripple network versus the Bitcoin network are two separate entities, right? So those who are Bitcoin fanatics and those long Bitcoin are going to want to stay true to that Bitcoin route. By all means, I mean to expand to every type of cryptocurrency, that I can back to the dollar. But I think Ripple is its own network unto itself, and I want to use, leverage again the Bitcoin network for this type transaction.
How would a loan made in Bitcoin be administered? And would your organization have any role in doing that, like making sure that someone is sending Bitcoin payments to a certain address at a certain time and paying back some amount of the loan every month or whatever?
So that's part of the infrastructure of the platform. The actual loan initiated on the platform, in order to send money or offer money to a potential borrower, the money needs to be sitting in escrow. So that's just a sign to us that this lender is for real, and I'm not going to play games at the 12th hour to make sure I get the payment. Likewise, the repayment structure is automated within the platform. I think we're allowing repayment in both coin and dollars. Again, there's a fee associated with the dollar transaction, but it'll be scheduled and done via our interface. Repayments.
Okay, and who is the escrow? Is it a fourth party?
I think it probably should be a fourth party, so that we're not, culpable for any loss. There's, players in the space right now that are offering that sort of service. Circle Financial being one of them. Who else offers the service? Bitstamp, I think, offers the service. So there's a couple different ways to do this. I just don't want to, have that not liability, but skew to my position by holding someone's Bitcoin.
And with something like this, where at least some of the lending is made in Bitcoin some of the time, do you expect to be able to offer people better interest rates? Like, is that how you're going to bring them in?
Yes. I think the idea is we'll charge what the market will bear from a lending perspective. But remember, these guys that are long, or anyone long Bitcoin right now, has no opportunity to get even an incremental jump. You'd have to go purchase more. I think the opportunity to gain just a slight amount of interest, especially given its deflationary nature, is what any investor is looking for. So if I'm long, 100,000 or let's say 10,000 Bitcoin, and I want to allocate some of my portfolio to a more risky, endeavor to get more Bitcoin, I think it's just sensible investment.
Are people going to be collateralizing these loans? Are they going to be putting up collateral?
I think collateralized loans is the next step to all of this. I think I'd rather have an unsecured type lending basis to begin, because when you start, and this comes into the colored coin realm, when you start attaching assets to a coin or a portion of coins, it's a whole new evolution in terms of the business scope. So initially, no, I think we're going to stick with unsecured.
And, what kind of customers do you envision having? Like companies who are taking out loans to, finance a startup venture, or like individuals paying their mortgages, or individuals paying $1,000 for some computer that they can't afford right away? Who are your customers? I think
anyone who needs to borrow money is really our customer. And the idea of the platform is that it's scalable. From the very small, I need to buy a computer type scenario, to the broader, I need to make my mortgage payment. Can you take your mortgage payment out in Bitcoin? You probably could, but that's years from now. Who knows how long. But I think it's extensible then to the level of municipal lending. So if I'm a municipality that needs to build a bridge, a road, and I need $100 million, it's obviously onerous to have that process done. I have to go to a bank. I have to get it underwritten. I have to go, and that costs a lot of money. Instead, listen, here's the community at large using the interface. $10 adds up pretty quick. The $100 million is going to take a while, but you follow what I'm saying. It's the many lenders to one borrower.
So you are actually looking at the potential for small lenders to get involved in this and earn a return on their Bitcoins potentially.
Correct. Yeah, I think from the smallest to the largest, but my target market is those more sophisticated investors. I'm hesitant to say high net worth or accredited. Given the average age is 32.7 of a Bitcoin holder and 96% male, the target market is someone mid-30s to 40s, long Bitcoin, unhappy with an interest-free return.
Great. Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to add? Are you looking for feedback, investors, or is there a place where people can go online to find out more?
Not yet.
Okay. Not yet. Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Jack, for your time today. It's been interesting talking to you about this.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for listening to episode 113 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Content for this episode was provided by Stephanie Murphy, Jeremy Lamb, Timo Honke, Parker Emerson, Jack Kiernan, and Adam B. Levine. Content for this episode was edited by Adam B. Levine and Denise Levine. Music for this episode was provided by Jared Rubens and General Fuzz. Any questions or comments? Email Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. Have a good one.